So today marks the beginning of putting the majority of the main garden in. And this year is a little bit funny. We normally have a fairly cool May. Like there's some years that I don't put any of our warm weather crops like tomatoes, peppers, squash, beans, any of those things out. We don't even begin planting them until Memorial Day weekend. Now at the time of this filming, we are at the very beginning of May. We've already had one weekend where we were 92 degrees here, Fahrenheit. And this coming weekend, we are supposed to actually hit 97 degrees Fahrenheit. We're supposed to be above 80 for the next, starting tomorrow, I believe it is. Today's only in the 70s, hallelujah. I'm gonna relish every moment of coolness. So I don't know what that is going to do to our garden crops. I have been gardening for going on 24 years here, and we've never had springs that were this hot this early for those extended periods of time. So I am doing my normal planting today. We're gonna get the beets in and our potatoes in, but we'll see how they do because they generally like a little bit cooler weather. I'm gonna put them in anyhow, and we're just gonna see what happens. That's kind of with gardening and homesteading. You can have done something for 24 years and you're gonna have anomalies, and you're just gonna see what happens and do some experimenting. So we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna fire this up, get the trenches for the potatoes in, and we're gonna start planting. I tell you what, somebody needs to invent GPS for garden tools. Okay, now that I actually have everything I need, I swear I always think I have everything and then get halfway through it and have to go round up the rest of the stuff. But we are now ready to begin planting our potatoes. So we've got the 3 different trenches here, and I'm planting 2 varieties of potatoes this year. We're doing the German Butterball, which is my absolute favorite. It's a great storage potato, excellent flavor, just kind of an all-around really great potato. Sometimes I grow russets, but I found that I always prefer the German Butterball. And so I never get to the russets unless I didn't plant enough of the German Butterball and I run out of them. And then I go to the russets and I'm like, well, it's kind of dumb to keep planting those. Why don't you just plant the ones that you like the most and just do more of them? So that's what we're doing this year. But my husband loves the fingerlings. Those are his favorites. So we're gonna do those 2 varieties this year, but the fingerlings are not an indeterminate variety, meaning they only grow to a determined height and set a determined amount of tubers, which is the potatoes that you're harvesting. So you don't hill those. It's just not gonna benefit you. It's just kind of wasted effort on your part. So I'm gonna put the fingerlings in this outer row because I won't need to be grabbing soil to hill them as they grow, whereas I will with the German Butterballs because those are an indeterminate variety. And so if you hill them up until they start to blossom, at that point, then they're not going to grow any more than what they've already got set. So that's when you stop hilling. But I will usually end up hilling them at least 2 times, which means I need to have extra soil available to me. So I'm gonna put them in the center so that I can grab some soil from both sides of the row to keep hilling those up. But we already worked in to this spot. Last year this was our little pumpkin patch. So I did some ornamental pumpkins, sugar pie pumpkins. We just put pumpkins in here, but it was the first year that we'd grown anything here. It had just been yard, which is really funny because you can kind of see the progression. So that's our main garden that we started out with when we first moved in here in 2006. And it was about half that size. So every year it just kind of increased and increased and increased. And then we did the high tunnel, which that's, I think the high tunnel is going on almost 10, I think it's 10 years actually this year. It's amazing how the years start to run together. And then we added, the high tunnel actually was originally in this spot here where I have 2 rows of onions there on the end, and we haven't planted yet in the center of that one. But that was where the high tunnel was. And then we decided to rotate it because I didn't want to keep putting the tomatoes in the same spot. We'd had it there for about 5 years. So we rotated it over, created a new high tunnel spot, and then this just became regular garden space. Then last year on the other side of that, where we've got our cauliflower, cabbage, and broccoli, we put in some rows. And then we put this one in this year. I don't have any plans of putting in a new garden bed here this year. We'll see. Because in probably 2 years from now, you'll see me out here in the garden, we'll be doing a video, and this whole expanse will then probably be garden beds. But for right now, we're holding steady, at least on this farm, with the beds that we've put in. So this last year had pumpkins. It was just pumpkins that was in this spot, different varieties of pumpkins. So as far as crop rotation goes, we're gonna go ahead and throw potatoes in here this year. Added in some extra compost, and you can kind of see where we got the compost worked in really good and where it's a little bit lighter brown. It's not as dark and rich in color. This is more like a really, deep, dark, good, loamy, really nice soil here. And then that section down there is where we didn't get the compost worked in as well. And you can see that it doesn't have that dark richness in it. So I'll probably add a little bit more there, but just so you can kind of see what adding in the compost does, just visually to the soil, and of course, a lot more nutrients. But with growing potatoes specifically, what I have here is sulfur powder. So sulfur is going to change your pH. And sulfur is actually going to lower your pH number, but that makes it more acidic. So remember, the lower the number on your pH scale, the more acidic it is. And I always sprinkle in a little bit of sulfur powder at the time of planting with my potatoes, because if your soil is on the more acidic side, then it helps to eliminate or lessen scab. So if scab is something that you get on your potatoes, adding in sulfur, will help that. So our outer row here, this is the fingerling mix. And these are certified seed potatoes. They're also certified organic. And what that means is they are certified to be free of common diseases that you can get with potatoes, especially blight. Blight, if you ever, the potato famine, most of us studied that in history class or heard about it. That was from late blight. And so it's important that you are starting with certified disease-free stock in order to try to avoid that. And last year we ate all of the fingerlings, so I didn't have any saved for seed potatoes. So I went ahead and ordered more of them. And these guys, as you can see, there's got a lot of sprouts here happening. They're ready to go in the ground. So these are your eyes. And this is what's gonna grow up, and then it will send out, and you'll have the tubers that will develop off of these, and then you'll get your big green leafy foliage on top of the ground. So some of these bigger ones you can cut in half, but oftentimes I see people make this mistake when they are planting and using their seed potatoes, and that is they will just cut out like 1 or 2 eye sections, and they'll cut out a really small amount because they'll try to cut out every eye from one potato and use that to start more potato plants. But these eyes need the nutrients that are in this potato when they first start to grow. It's kind of like when a seed is germinating. So before this is up and above at the top part of the soil where it can start to do photosynthesis and draw nutrients that way and develop some roots, it's going to draw everything from this seed potato. So if you cut it super small, you're actually creating a weaker, smaller plant, which is going to mean a weaker, smaller harvest, right? You want to make sure that you are not cutting and dividing up your seed potato too much, thinking that you're just going to get more plants and more potatoes. You're actually lessening your harvest and lessening the vigorous of said potato plants by doing that. So this one I could probably go ahead and cut it in half. But when you do that, you ideally want to let them air dry for a couple of days to kind of scab over that cut part. Otherwise, it's more prone to rot when you put it in the ground, because it's a fresh wound, fresh cut of the potato. So because these fingerlings are relatively so small, I just go ahead and plant the whole potato in the ground and don't have any problem with that, and usually get a really large harvest. So what I like to do is, now this does smell like sulfur because it smells sulfur, right? So it's fine. I don't really worry about it getting on my skin, but I like to use a shovel and work in a small amount at the planting hole. And I'll just kind of do a spacing, just a trowel full at a time. And then like you can see, this one is much smaller. It's quite a bit smaller. So this one I would not cut up. This one I would make sure that you just leave whole, whereas some of these bigger ones, you could cut them in half if you really needed to stretch it, and you'd still be okay. Okay, fingerling row is done. Now here I have, this is the certified seed potatoes that I got in of the German butterball, which is what I'm actually going to be planting in these 2 rows today. But I wanted to show you, this is what I harvested. I pulled these from the ground about 3 weeks ago. It was mid-April. And these are the German butterballs. I think there may be a few russets as I shared my story. I think there's a couple of russets in here. They have so much dirt on them, I can't tell at this point. But this was what was left from last year's potato harvest. I covered them with straw end of September, first part of September, and these overwintered all the way through until mid-April, which is when I just dug them up. So these were, original stock was from certified seed potatoes. Actually had been seed saving these each year and just replanting them for the past couple years. But the German butterball takes about 110 to 120 days from planting before you're going to begin to harvest. So I was kind of stuck with, this is the amount of potatoes I have left. Do I want to buy potatoes from the store, which I usually can't find certified organic German butterball potatoes at our stores. It's just not a variety that I run into. It's usually like, what is it, Yukon Gold, I think. So do I want to do that? Or do I want to just go ahead? I can knock off some of these sprouts that are just starting to happen and preserve up the rest of these to take us through all of summer. So I'll probably do some hash browns and some French fries and just freeze them or freeze dry them. And I'll probably can some to just use like potato salads or to make mashed potatoes from. I might end up freeze drying some more mashed potatoes because that actually worked fabulous for homemade instant mashed potatoes. But I decided that I was just going to go ahead and I was going to save these and we're going to use these as eating potatoes. I'll probably work on preserving them over the next couple of weeks because I don't want these sprouts to grow any further. Otherwise, they're not going to be any good for eating. So I went ahead and just got in some new certified, same company, seed potatoes of the German butterball and decided that I would just plant these guys instead and save this harvest. Because you can see also these guys are a lot bigger because they weren't harvested purposely or grown for seed potatoes. They're for my eating potatoes. There's some that are smaller that would be fine. So these I will go and take back in the house. I just brought them out here to show you, but I definitely don't want to store them where it's in direct sunlight and hot because I don't want to encourage any more of the sprouting. So we're going to go ahead and see. Here's those lovely little German butterballs and get them into these rows, throw my sulfur down and put our potatoes in. One of the things you want to keep in mind is how far apart to keep your rows. So ideally about 30 inches apart for your rows is going to be great. You can see here, I've got these just a little bit closer. I'd say they're probably a little bit more around 26 inches. I don't worry too much if it's a couple of inches. I know the soil here is really fertile. So I'm not too worried about that, but ideally 30 to 36 inches apart is kind of standard conventional wisdom for your depth of, not depth of rows, width of keeping your rows apart from one another. Well, potatoes are planted. Now, I was thinking of trying to fit 2 rows of beets in here, but beans were supposed to be so hot, I am just gonna do 1 row of beets and probably save the rest of my seed, and we'll just do a larger beet crop for fall. in the hopes that fall will be a little bit more of our normal cool temperatures. I mean, it's hard to say because the next 10 days we're supposed to be 80 degrees and over with some almost 100 degrees temperatures. But then if we fall back to our normal for June and really even July, we'd only be like in the 70s as highs. So being we're having such a heat spell so early and it's our second one, I have a feeling that the rest of summer is just going to probably be hotter than normal. So I'm not going to go ahead and put in the normal amount of cool crops that I can still usually plant. And I'm going to save those and just do a larger fall planting of those types of crops. In fact, I'm a little nervous for all of the cauliflower and broccoli and cabbage. It didn't bolt in our last one because it was only 2 days and we were still cooling down like well into the 40s at night. So that did help keep the soil cool with the mulch. But 10 days in a row, I'm a little worried I might not get anything. They may all bolt. So there's not a whole lot you can do though. Can't control the weather, unfortunately. At least I can't. So with your beets, I soak mine overnight before planting. It just helps them to germinate more because a beet seed, it's actually a little cluster and it's got a hard outer encasing, but it's actually a cluster of seeds inside this one beet seed. It's not one individual seed like you would, with a squash or something like that, which is why you generally have to thin your beets because you can't pick apart these little seeds when you plant them. They're already encased in this. So I was trying to remember exactly how I had these. This is the beet pronto, which is a red beet, but it's only 55 days from planting till harvest. So right now we're at the beginning of May. That should put me towards the end of June, which typically would be before we get too hot, that these would all be ready to harvest and grow. So the majority of the ones that I am planting, I went ahead and did that had that shorter growth date, just knowing we might have a really hot summer. And I know I'm going to have to thin these regardless. So I'm putting them, they're really about, I don't know, what would you call that? Probably about 3 inches. I am so bad at visually gauging exact measurements. But I know I'm going to thin them, so I'm not really too worried if they're a little bit close together because I will thin them out once they have germinated. And so they won't grow too close together to impact size. Now this next section, and they're all beets, so I'm just throwing all these varieties together. This is the bullseye, and this one is a little bit longer. I think it's an 85 day. So I'm not planting as many of these just in case we are super hot. And the beets don't do well in really hot weather, or as well, I should say. All right, and last but not least, these are a yellow beet, and these are one of my favorites. I actually discovered golden beets, I think about 4 years ago. I had only ever eaten or grown the red ones. Oh my gosh, I love the yellow ones. I think this is gonna sound funny, but I feel like they have less of a dirt flavor. Now, I like red beets. I like pickled beets. I like roasted beets. I pretty much just love beets in all the ways. I even put beets into chocolate cake. I'll put that recipe in the video description below. But if you have people in your family who thinks beets taste dirty, try the golden ones. They're really, really good. Okay, this section of the potatoes and the beets are in, but we also have the farm stay and the other farm, which we're doing a garden down there as well. So I'm not sure if I'm actually gonna be able to get, I ordered extra potatoes to be able to put some potatoes down there. I'm not sure if I'm actually gonna be able to get those planted today though, because the power company, which I'm actually very excited about, it's been many months in the planning and making, is swapping out the transformer at the light pole down there because it actually wasn't large enough. It was too antiquated to adequately power everything. But the really exciting part is we're getting power to the event barn down there. So I'm trying to stay out of their way today and not go down. So I'm giving them the morning and focusing on the gardens here, but I will be going down there this afternoon. And as long as I'm not in their way where they're pulling, we already put in the trenching and the pipe to pull the lines through. So if I'm not in their way and it's not too noisy, I may try to go down there and plant and check everything out. we'll have to see. So I'm kind of reserving my afternoon for getting these crops in down at that garden too. If you want more information on different varieties of potatoes and planting them and all the exacts, as well as growing beets, we'll link below. You can go to melissaknorris.com, and I have got full-on planting tutorials on the website there. And if you want to see the video of how I actually leave the potatoes in the ground all year long, you can catch that video here.